We've searched far and wide through this Dragon squad, and I tell you what, we found the best cheapie you'll ever see. But it's not from the Dragons. Here we are, Scoop. We got the Dragons. Let's get him out of the way. Let's see if we can find a gem, hey?
Yeah, g'day, Jamie. There's not a lot to be relevant with the Dragons this year, fantasy or NRL-wise, but there are a couple of guys who potentially might be in some interesting pods if round 2 lines up the way that we think it might.
Yeah, tell us more about that with round 2.
Yeah, well, with the bye every week this year, the Dragons have pulled the one out of the hat where they have the first week off. And so out of all the other teams, they're the one that we have the least certainty on. So guys like Sullivan who've strained their hammy, we don't know for certain if they're going to be ready for round 1. We just can't really predict how, for example, the split will be between Little and Hooker or where Bird ends up, for example.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of questions. Obviously, yeah, it might not be super relevant for round 1, but guys will come up along the year, so it's probably good to learn about these guys in this video and then potentially just look back later as the season goes on and injuries and suspensions and all the rest happen, because we definitely see some interesting guys like Sullivan, who we'll speak about a little bit later. But their early season draw, we've got obviously the bye first up, Titans, Broncos, are going to be okay games, and then you've got the Sharks, who's going to be pretty tough. You've got Dolphins, Titans, and then Raiders from there. So it's not the worst. And then really, after that round 1 bye, they've got to run all the way through to round 16 for non-Origin guys. So there's definitely going to be some type of interest for players in this Dragon side. And we'll start up top, and obviously we've got Talatau Amone, who's up there, and he's not going to be playing, right?
No, I think I saw this morning that basically the tradie fell off the roof when he chased him with the hammer. He's going to be in a lot of trouble and was officially stood down the other day. I don't think we'll see him back for a good while, if at all.
Yeah, not a good look at all. So not good. We got Jackie Bird. He's someone that's definitely going to catch some of our interest, given he's one of the top guns at centre. Just be aware of that. He does seem to move around a little bit in all the positions. What are your thoughts, Scoop, on him?
Yeah, he's a little bit like a Kurt Mann option. He can play lock. I think he's actually been training a fair bit at lock this preseason. He was talking about competition for Origin spots, and he was talking about guys like Yo and Murray in front of him. So indications that he's playing at lock, which would make him a pretty good buy. I think he averaged about 50 there the back end of last year when he did that. So if he starts there, that's a great buy with the center position dual. Priced at about 42. The problem is he's so versatile that he can play 5/8. He can play in the second row. He can play centre. How long is he going to stay at lock if the Dragons get off to a poor start? Will DeBellin move back then? Bird move to second row? You've just got no certainty at all, particularly with no round 1 for him to confirm anything.
So with Jack, do we see him as potentially sitting on him a little bit? If he plays a few games, he ends up at centre, he ends up having some lower minute games and then gets moved into a role like lock role if there's an injury to some other guys, he could be a pickup then?
Yeah, 100%. Bird's one of the 2 or 3 players who are in that price bracket where you can pretty safely let them go through and watch for the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then when one of your mid-rangers goes down with injury or just flops, you can switch him to a Bird if Bird is actually doing what you want him to do.
Yeah, because he's going to be that consistent guy. Even though his role's uncertain, he's fairly consistent scoring-wise, and in that centre position, he's not someone who's going to get you a 10 like a gun centre could, or a 15 or a 20. It's going to be more like, you'll get the 30, then you'll get the 65 from him. So it's a nice floor and ceiling there. And if we're looking at that 13 role, which you're speaking about, DeBellin looks like he's going to be the one that should get that role. He's now had a full preseason under his belt. Just speak about him and his previous years before he was out of the game for a few. He was one of the top guns that we look to select in our teams every year.
Yeah, well, from memory, I think DeBellin was pretty much around the high 50, 60 points scorer when he was playing those really, really big minutes at lock. I don't know if he'll play as many this year if he does end up at lock. A little bit like a McInnes situation where he was playing massive lock minutes at the Dragons before he went to the Sharks, and then sort of went down to that 50-ish average because he was doing the sort of 50 to 60 minutes. I could see DeBellin doing a similar thing and not really being a huge amount of value unless he gets those really big minutes off the bat.
Yeah, and I suppose that could be a trap for some people as well. If there are games where there are injuries in game or something, he's definitely going to be that guy to play big minutes, and it could be he gets a 60 in a 75-minute game. So just be aware of that. He is a guy that can play the big minutes, but it probably won't be a regular thing. And if it does happen to be a regular thing, then I definitely see some value in him because he is that guy that has a lovely PPM. Just could just been a thing last year. He played a few less minutes because he'd been out of the game for a few years, but something to definitely keep an eye on. We got the Fainai brothers there. We got Matt and Max. So 406 and then 319 respectively. Do we see much value in any of these two guys?
I don't really think so. I think I can't remember which one sat on the wing for the Dragons for a good portion of last year. I think he's mostly at price as a result. And the other brothers usually play center, but with Lomax and Sully, they're doing a pretty good job in a poor Dragons team. I don't think that's going to change outside of injury. So at the moment, not really relevant, but they're reasonably exciting and reasonably cheap. So one to watch if there's an injury or two.
That's fair. Yeah, that was probably a couple of their bright spots, wasn't it? Sully and Lomax did a great job there for sure. We got Tyrell Fuimaono. He's potentially a trap, as you've said there in the comments. Just to be aware, everyone, guys, that he is pretty much always at basement price, and he's there for a reason. He'll come in and get a 31 game, but it might, he'll get the 60 minutes, and it's like, he got a 33 in 60 minutes, but he then goes back to the bench and scores like a 6 in 25 or something like that. So be aware of him, guys. We probably won't be looking at him at any point this season, but he always comes up if he does get a start. So just be aware of that. Benny Hunt, so he's an interesting one. I spoke about him in the half guns already. At 646, you saw how well he played last year. Probably, almost should have won Dally M. So for him to average 45 is a little bit of a worry. And just tell us a little bit about him, Scoop.
Yeah, I saw a stat that Ben Hunt's tackles have dropped a lot in recent years. For some reason, he's the main dominant half. He kicks nearly everything. The whole team pretty much runs through him. And in the past, that's put him at an over 50 average in a decent pod, especially sometimes through the origin period when he wasn't doing that sort of 40 minutes hooker role with Grant for Queensland. But yeah, if he can get his tackle numbers back up, because he has played hooker, he can tackle. I can see him pushing higher, but at the moment, there's just no real reason to buy with a lot of better options available.
Yeah, so many in the half position. That's the thing. When he plays hooker in Origin, he pretty much makes all these tackles. I just don't think he just doesn't defend as well on the edge. So many missed tackles. It's a killer to watch because he'll have 3 try assists, and you look up and he's on like 33 with 10 minutes left. You're like, what? What's happening? Like he's got a line break. He's got a bunch of tackle breaks, but it obviously just kills him there. Joshy Kerr is an interesting one as well. At 382, he comes in pretty cheap, but there's probably a reason that he comes in fairly cheap.
Yeah, well, he's a little bit like Fuimaono. His role changes a little bit depending on what's happening with the team or how they're going. I initially had him down as a little bit of a sneaky option if he started at edge. Very uncertain, but with Ben Murdoch-Masila also signing recently, we'll get down to that in a minute and update his price. But yeah, it was probably just wishful thinking. There's not really much value to be seen in Kerr.
Yeah, for sure. Blake Laurie is obviously an interesting one as well, but probably a little bit weirdly priced at 537. He definitely has some games where he scores well, but do we see much of a change minutes-wise for him?
No. Well, as I noted in the comments, he sort of seems to play the same minutes whether from the bench or starting. So I think he's just going to sit around that high 30s, 40 average again.
Yeah, I can agree with that. There's a lot better options in that middle. Anyway, with Saifidi and all these types of guys. So Jacob Little is someone that I definitely had some interest in. He has scored pretty well in the past in a big minute hooker role, which you look at this team and you don't really see many guys that could come in and steal some minutes from him. So if he does get the 80 minutes, I see a little bit of value. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, he's a very interesting option. It's just a little bit unfortunate that we can't see round 1. Mbai would probably be the one to take that 15, 20 minutes off him at hooker, or maybe even Sullivan. With the Sullivan hamstring injury and Amone gone, there's a chance we might see Mbai in the 5/8 position. And Little gets some more minutes, close to 80, which would be really great for him, but we just can't know for certain.
And that round 1 buy is obviously great for Sullivan to give him another week to to get ready. So yeah, I think with Little, you can just sit on him a little bit, see what happens, and then potentially move him in. If it looks like he's playing well, that's going to be the big thing. If he's playing great, then I think he'll keep the minutes. If he's not as great, then they'll definitely spell him a little bit. Zachy Lomax, so obviously one of the top centers as well. He could play a factor at some point of the year, but just with my thoughts with Dragons and how well they're going to play this year, he probably doesn't exceed that 43 much. What do you think?
Yeah, he's the goal kicker for the Dragons and a pretty good scorer, 43 average. I think that put him in the about third for the centers, but he's just not really super exciting in this Dragons team. If he can kick more goals, get more involved if the Dragons go well, he'll be probably one of the top couple, but they just don't look very inspiring this year, do they?
No, they don't. And Moses Mbai comes in at the 300 price point, which is pretty nice. And if there is talk, with Sullivan, guys, there's about 6 weeks left of the preseason, and if he's going to be out for another 5, they have the buy in round 1. There's every chance that he doesn't get that role at number 6, so he could be a bench guy. And if he is, do we just avoid him? And if he does get a start at some point, do we still avoid him?
Yeah, Moses Mbai is basically the Mr. Fix-It of the Dragons squad. He's a little bit like Wishart for the Storm, the back end of last year. He's one game he'll start and then he'll get you 10 points from 15 minutes from the bench. You can't rely on him. He scored 100 once like 5 years ago, but other than that, he's really been fantasy irrelevant.
Yeah. And talk to us about Francis Mola. You've got him here as a little TLT watch.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of forwards leaving the Dragons, and Ben Murdoch-Masila signing is probably bolsters that a little bit, but somebody's going to have to get a few more minutes than they did last year, and Molo's potentially one of those guys that could. I don't think it'll be enough because, we're talking more about the Knights and guys like that who have lost more forwards and replacing with guys like Elliott. But in the Dragons, there's a little bit, probably not enough, but we'll just have to see how it pans out.
Yeah, very fair. And Michael Bolo, he's at 345. Is he just a bit too awkward of a price at this point?
Yeah, I'd say so. He's probably less likely to start than Francis Molo, and yeah, there's a little bit too much uncertainty, especially with the round 1. I'd just let him go through to the keeper.
Yeah, and Ben Murdoch-Masila, obviously, when you did this, he wasn't in the game yet, but he's just over 300k, I believe. And we've seen some of the scores that he can pick up in a starting role, in a bench role. Obviously not big minutes, but he's someone who's going to be really cheap. If he's getting a bit of a role on an edge, maybe a little bit through the middle, a little bit on the edge, and he actually comes out and shows a bit of talent. That's probably their main issue, is their edge guys, apart from Jaden Sewer, don't have a lot of attacking prowess. And I think that's something that they're going to struggle with and what Ben Hunt is looking for. So you could potentially have a role. What do you think with him?
Yeah, I've just went back and had a look at him. They've put him as the mid position, and there's a chance that he might be named on the edge, so he might get dual. And he is actually at that 250 basement price. So if he is in the team round 1, he's a very, very good guy to stick in your 18 to 21.
Yeah, he's very interesting. Yeah, some of the scores though are very hot and cold. So I even looked at him and thought, maybe. So we'll see how we go on that one. We've got Musgroves, just a bit too expensive at 420. We'll leave him out. Cody Ramsey looks like he's probably going to be out as well. It seems like his injury is a bit too worrisome, actually, even for just his normal health. So put a pen through him, unfortunately, at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment, it was between him and Sloan, and Ramsey had that problem. I can't remember what its official name is, but it's like chronic gut ulcers or something, which is really, really hard to go and train through. And it's sort of an ongoing problem. So he might even, I've heard rumors that he might even just take this whole year off to get himself right and sort of get his health back to where it should be. And Sloan would probably take that main role. Yeah,
and thoughts on Sloan while we're here?
I think out of all the guys at the Dragons who could probably be interested in, Sloan's probably the safest and the best. I'd say Mbai won't affect Sloan too much. And at 250k, even though his past scoring at fullback has been pretty rubbish, as a fullback that's base price, you've got to chuck him in at least as a looper for round 1, and surely he can average high 20s, 30 points at fullback.
Yeah, so your general theory there is that he, as a young player, should improve. Is that what we're hoping for? It's just a hope.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I have heard good raps on Sloan for this preseason. We've heard that in the past as well. So I think if he nails down his position with Ramsey out, he could be a good option.
Yeah, because for those who aren't sure, he did get the chance and then eventually got dropped after a bunch of games. He didn't score very well, lots of missed tackles. So if he can clean up all that a little bit, it's obviously things that he would be working on in the last year, then yeah, he could potentially be an option. But yeah, he doesn't have to score a lot, does he? Mid-20s and he'll make a bit of cash and do something. So you could go worse at that 250 price point anyway. But wait for TLT for him. We've got Jaden Sewer at 620. Yeah, very middle of the run type of player, always a 40s type of average guy. He'll have a good game or two where he does score a really hectic try because he actually is a really good footy player. Just base stat wise isn't a big scorer. Any more to say on him? And if not, go straight to Sully.
Yeah, not much on Sewer. I think he's just going to sit in that 40s bracket again and not be either a keeper or a cow. Moses Sully, he actually was one of the top tackle breakers last year. It was a reasonable shining light in a pretty ordinary Dragons team. You can see he's averaged 39.4 last year. I don't think he's quite a keeper, but he is definitely one to just keep an eye on if he drops a little bit and then goes on a bit of a run, especially with that easy-ish opening draw.
Yeah, well, can he improve on that last year? That's probably the only question, but he could definitely be one of those top 5-6 centre guns if he continues to put good seasons together. Jaden Sullivan, he's been priced up a couple of points to only at 24 though, and we've seen him when he has got opportunities in the 6 or the 7 role. He's been able to do really well. He has some nice scores at hooker, but that's going to be very different to where he's going to play. With the hamstring injury, as you mentioned, it's a little bit of a worry of that re-injury rate, so probably going to be a watch to start off with, but if he can get a couple of games off the bench, he could be interesting at 6, right?
Yeah, I think so. The only worry with him is that he actually gets involved enough because he doesn't kick a lot. Ben Hunt will take over the majority of that, so that limits his ceiling. But I still think there's a good amount of value in him if he gets that starting 6 role.
Yeah. And Sharon Woods to finish. Not too much to say on him. Let's have our overall thoughts on the Dragons to finish it off.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of interesting pod options, and if you're sort of borderline on someone and you need a looper for a really good round 1 scorer who's sitting in your emergencies, there might be a couple that you can gamble on, but otherwise there's not a lot of solidarity with the Dragons.
Yeah. Well, I wish the Dragons a lot of luck. I have them down the bottom of the ladder, unfortunately. Let's hope the Dragons fans, for their sake, that they prove a few people wrong. But yeah, not too much to say further on this. We're going to head to the Eels next. So thanks, guys, for being here.